Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Patent's AAC Talk Spring 2019 online web conference. You've joined the session called Empower Your AAC Teams, using Power AAC for professional development. So before we begin, I'd like to remind you all that all of you in attendance are in listen-only mode, but you do have access to a Q&A and chat feature in your Zoom screen. We'll be monitoring the questions throughout, and we'll share questions with the presenters as time allows. The session is being recorded. We do intend to post these sessions after a period of time on our patent website. At the end of the live session, we'll provide you with a code for continuing ed verification. And if you have questions about that, more information can be found on the conference page on the patent website. I'll put the link directly to that conference page into the chat momentarily. So you'll also find on that page an email address to use if you have experienced any technical difficulties during the live webinar. So welcome to AAC Talk session entitled Empower Your AAC Teams, using Power AAC for professional development. And we are honored once again to have our AAC Talk speaker, Gail Van Tatenhove, join us. Gail has collaborated extensively with us at Patent over the course of many years, particularly in the development of the Power AAC modules, which are the topic of this session this morning. So without further ado, I will turn things over to Gail.
Thank you, Susan. Let me also welcome you to this panel discussion and presentation on Power AAC. As Susan mentioned, I'm Gail Van Tatenhove, and I am the author of the Power AAC modules. I'm also a practicing speech-language therapist in Orlando, Florida. So for the past several years, I've been able to collaborate with folks at Patent and help put together this Power AAC modules as well as this presentation. I'm going to start us off today, and I will ask each member of our panel to introduce herself, starting with Erin and then Nora and Tammy. Ladies, would you introduce yourselves, please?
Good morning. I'm Erin Mcmanaman, and I am an SLP working as an educational consultant in the area of assistive technology at Tuscarora Intermediate Unit 11.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nora Connell. I'm from the Delaware County Intermediate Unit, and I am also a speech-language pathologist, and I do consultation for students in early intervention and school age who are in need of augmentative communication.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tammy Bertell, and I'm an assistive technology consultant at Montgomery County Intermediate Unit number 23, working with staff in early intervention through age 21, particularly in the area of assistive technology.
All right, thank you. Our plan is to do a quick introduction to the Power AAC project and the modules, followed by a very short poll so that we can have a better idea of who you are and your experience using the Power AAC modules. Then we're going to have a discussion with time for questions. Our panel discussion will be centered around 5 general topics. Then we'll wrap it up and give you a chance to share with us what you see as your next steps after participating in this webinar. In addition to this time of discussion and Q&A, we have provided some resources relative to professional development and the Power AAC modules. You can download those at the AAC Talk Web conference page, but we will not be using them today in this webinar. Having said that, let me give you a little background to the Power AAC modules. AAC and a focus on core vocabulary has been a topic that I've been speaking on for many years. I partnered with Patent to help create the Power AAC modules. Through the Power AAC modules, the message of AAC with core vocabulary can now reach a much wider audience. The name Power AAC was selected intentionally to reflect the belief that AAC intervention is effective and sustainable when we all practice powerful communication partner skills. So there's the P, partner skills. It's also effective and sustainable when we create powerful communication opportunities, implement power words in social and instructional contexts, continually utilize evidence in decision-making about AAC systems and supports, and create, implement, and share powerful resources. Over the years, I have seen that anyone can use the Power AAC modules, making learning possible for everybody. For anyone who has not checked out the modules, or it's been a while since you've used the modules, this slide shows you where at the new updated Patan website you will find them. From the Patan homepage, navigate to Assistive Technology and then to AT for Communication, where you'll find Power AAC. You know what? If you'd be a personal favor to me, if you make it a favorite place so that you can go back to it quickly and easily. There are 12 Power AAC modules. Module 1 provides an overview, which is the module that we hope you complete first. Each module can stand alone, but the order of the modules, particularly the first 6 modules, lay some important foundational principles for the later modules. Generally, we hope that people will be reflective of their classroom practices and how those practices influence the communication skills of students with low or no speech. Modules 3, 4, and 5 help a person new to the field of AAC to think about the range of multimodal AAC options that are available, the words that will go on the AAC system, and the way that those words will be represented. Module 6 helps teaching teams think about the kinds of visual supports and educational scaffolds that need to be developed and put into place. Modules 7 through 10 deal primarily with implementation issues. These are really where the rubber meets the road in terms of changing how we interact with students using AAC systems, implementing effective teaching strategies to achieve desired student outcomes, and supporting parents and the families in their use of the AAC system at home. The modules wrap up with ideas for collecting data to document outcomes and then connecting you with the AAC community for ongoing support, insights, and resources. All of the modules are organized the same way. They were authored using PowerPoint, and there is a PowerPoint show which I narrate for each module. If you want a printout of the narration, you can get a transcript or the slides with the notes. If you want to use the PowerPoint in a live training, you can download the PowerPoint slides. The notes will be included, but you can change, update, or customize the PowerPoint slides to fit the professional development needs of your audience. Hopefully, there is enough flexibility in each module to allow you to adjust them for your needs. Before we go any further, we would like to have you answer 4 short poll questions, starting with who you are professionally. So let me adjust here and go up to the poll. So please take a couple minutes here and answer each of the poll questions. I see that people are busily answering the poll. And at this stage in asking, who are you? Right now, I'm seeing a pretty strong predominance of speech language pathologists here. I'm just going to slide down and I'm going to take a look here. I'm seeing, what is your primary role relative to professional development? And I'm noticing that our audience so far seems to be primarily people who attend professional development opportunities, but don't necessarily develop materials or provide the training. Right. Then I'm going to slide on down. And it says, the third question, for your own professional development, how have you used the Power AAC modules? Boy, and I'm excited to see a lot of people right now are saying they have not used the module, but you're interested in learning more about them so you can use them. And that's fabulous. I'm really glad that so many of you are attending to see what the Power AAC modules are all about. And then number 4, how do you prefer to get professional development training? We're getting kind of a pretty strong response to the last option of people wanting a combination of self-directed online learning with additional face-to-face training. So I'm seeing right now about 131 of 166 have voted. So I'm just watching that. And when we get up to the 165 or close thereof, I will end the poll. But I want to make sure all of you have had an opportunity to cast your votes. I see 80% of you have voted. If it kind of just stays pretty stable there, I'll end the poll. And just let's do a quick recap here. You've had 4 minutes to do this. So again, we're predominantly here today, speech language pathologists with some special educators, a couple OTs, a couple administrators, a para, welcome, and a few others. And your primary roles, 70%, your attendees, but 20 of you develop. So 20% of you or 15% of you are people who develop and present. And then we got a smattering of people who present other people's materials as selecting. And again, heavy that many of you have not used the modules and some on your own. And remaining very strongly that you all like a combination of self-directed online learning with additional face-to-face. I'm hoping that people have had an opportunity to do the poll. If you had some technical difficulties, I apologize, but I'm going to just wait till 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and then I'll end the poll. All right, so I'm ending the poll. If I've cut off anybody, I apologize. But I think it's more important for us to have our discussion than wait too much longer. All right, so we'll take a look at sharing these results. So you can have 30 seconds or so to share these results. I've spoken through it. And I think I'll stop sharing that. All right, so you've done the poll questions. Thank you very much. So now that we know a little bit more about you, we can better adjust our discussion. Oops. So we've come up with some topics to guide our discussion and questions and answers. As we look at some photos, I'm going to ask each of our presenters to make a few points related to these topics in order to stimulate our discussion. We'll start off talking about the adult outcomes that we have observed and documented. So Erin, Nora, and Tammy will be taking over pretty much from here on. I will continue to advance the slides, but each of these colleagues will address the adult outcomes they've observed as a result of the use of the Power AAC modules. So can you tell us about how the adults designed and made core boards for their students? I'm passing this off to you ladies. Nora, Erin, anybody want to comment?
Okay, sure. This is Erin. What you are seeing on the screen right now is actually a photo of I think it's a 250 core board, Pixon board that actually we got within the Power AAC modules. And I actually had that printed, 2 copies from a printer, and I cut that out and attach it with Velcro. And so all of the classrooms that were using the Power AAC modules have one of these large posters in their classroom so that they can use to model. And I found that starting with that really helped the staff start to model and become much more comfortable with that idea of modeling. And I think that really was a starting point to get comfortable and start to change some adult behavior. And I think that was probably one of the most powerful outcomes, beginning with the large core board, and then we moved to small core boards, but it really made them start to feel more comfortable with modeling on AAC systems.
So one of the things, this is Nora, I'm from IU 25. One of the other things that we've done at our IU is we've used our students who are secondary level students who are learning work skills. We call them our option students, and we actually have had them do a lot of the cutting out and putting the Velcro on. That frees up the time for the teams, the SLPs, and the teachers to not have to do that, and it gives our secondary level students work opportunities, and they're able to do it as long as they have the fine motor skills. And so I usually consult with the teacher who's in charge of that to say, help us out with this, and it works out well for everybody.
Good.
Tammy, do you have any comment, or otherwise I'll go on to our next slide?
No, I think everything everyone's saying is great. I mean, I think core boards are important for the staff to be using as well as becoming familiar with, so that they can support students when they're using their own core boards, or as well as when the students are using, say, a device or something like that. I know a number of our staff became comfortable with using core boards across the different locations within their buildings as well. So they always had something the students could be communicating with, because we can't always communicate with something in hand. They always had something readily available, especially when they were in an physical activity such as physical education, or when they were in the lunchroom. So it was difficult to hold devices or that core board while they were holding something else, or when they were on the playground. So they really became comfortable with lots of different types of core boards at that moment. And that became something that they all became comfortable with, so that they really were able to communicate at every moment of the day. That really became something that they were able to communicate with all students, and no matter who that student was.
Since you were starting to address already that kind of that second issue, I advanced the slide for us to be thinking about another way that the adults changed. And you've already commented about how they're increasingly making core boards and charts available, not only in the classroom, but throughout the school. So Erin or Nora, would you like to, anybody want to comment additionally on making core boards and charts available to students?
Sure, this is Nora again. One of the things that the team that I worked with I've noticed is that the adults, because of the availability of the core vocabulary boards, the adults were modeling a lot more and on any student's AAC system, because it just brought the idea of modeling to the forefront. And then in addition to that, they started to become more purposeful and looking for more opportunities throughout the environment and throughout the day to set up communication. They also, so for example, they put a core board in all the different centers in our early intervention classroom, along with some fringe vocabulary. And so while the students say we're in the play center, that core vocabulary board was readily available. And they were starting to use that while the students were playing with, their preferred toys. Whereas before they did this, it was really just the time for the students to play, and maybe the adults were taking the students to the bathroom and there was no adult in the play area. So it really started to facilitate lots and lots of awareness and more opportunities for modeling and communication.
And this is Erin. One of the things that our team worked through was, in addition to having the large core board, and they were made individual core boards, they worked together to mask or hide some of the vocabulary on the core board, particular for each student. So that was a really thoughtful plan, and we worked together with the SLP and the classroom teacher and the paras, and during a planning period, and created some masked core boards. So that was done as a team, and during that activity, which was fun, you had a lot of good conversation about what words you were going to have available, and then which ones were next that you were going to start to teach and open up. So that was very positive and fun.
And I would make a comment on the examples that I see here, is that they obviously were done with or appears to me they were done with a modification for somebody, perhaps a classroom with kids that had some visual challenges. So that because of the dark black background, this is suggesting to me that this classroom had kids with visual challenges. Ladies, I don't recall who sent this photo to me. Was that the case in this classroom?
That was Nora. I sent those pictures, and yes, initially the students needed some high contrast and things like that. And then what has happened is, in that particular center, that has become the core vocabulary board of default, because everybody has become used to it.
Yeah.
And everybody's just using it much more regularly.
All right, excellent. Well, let's go on to our next adult adult outcome. And can you maybe speak a little bit, ladies, to how teams are using specific core words and activities to support communication? Here in this example, I see where they had separated out the words in and out and separated out the words all done and more.
Sure, this is Tammy. This is actually examples from some of our teams, and this is for some staff who were being very explicit in what they were trying to teach with these students and in these activities so that they could really focus on what they wanted to work with these students. And being very particular in what they were supporting their students with learning at that particular time so that they could really support them working through that process. And they were very successful as they were being very explicit at that moment.
All right. And I would say that in my observation, how people have been implementing core vocabulary and Power AAC principles, this is something that we see quite often when people are pulling very specific words for explicit instruction, which is keeping within the principles of what we were hoping for in the Power AAC modules. All right, let's address, ladies, a little bit about how the adults have changed in terms of engineering their classrooms to promote communication, and not just for academic things, but for those authentic communication in the classroom. And my definition of authentic communication would be child selected. These are things the child wants to say. So if you want to promote, talk about that at all.
So this is Nora. So the picture on the left has two icons that is open it, and I have a team that actually a whole building. They decided to focus on one particular time during the day where they would be very explicit and very purposeful in setting up communication opportunities. And so they decided, you know, the students are in and out of the classroom multiple times during the day, or in and out of the restroom multiple times during the day, in and out of the building. So they thought that these opportunities came up frequently, and they would set up the opportunity at the door with, you know, first modeling, open it multiple times. Everybody was doing it, the classroom teacher, the paraeducator, the SLP, the OT. And then eventually they would pause at the door and wait for a student to indicate that somebody needed to open the door. And so this is just one example of the icons that are around this one particular building. It's facilitated just a natural occurring opportunity. Didn't take a ton of time to get it going. And now, you know, after they did it, students were having opportunities to communicate for other than asking for, you know, a preferred object during play or a snack item.
And in my buildings, they did something very similar. So you would see similar icons on the doors, or maybe on their table for sit here, or you want to hand your work in, you know, put it here. So that provided the model. What I think was so powerful about having those icons, much more targeted vocabulary, was it was then setting up again for the adult to model. So that way the student then would see the adult modeling and then would then start to use that same vocabulary. So it was like little bits. You could just start, just say, open it, or sit here, and you're modeling. Here I'm touching the table. They're modeling. But it really just helped to start, you're looking at that core vocabulary all across the environment, and then adding that modeling was powerful.
And I could have seen all of these pictures in some of our teams' classrooms as well, because many of our teams are putting things in as go lunch or go bathroom as they were going to different places, and informing those that were there of where they were then going, because they were saying, this is where I'm going. And either an adult was modeling it, or the student was picking up on that modeling and informing where they were going, and giving that visual of where they were then heading as they were leaving that door.
Gail, this is Susan. I'm going to chime in with a really good question that came in. Just a clarification. There's someone asking, just to clarify, these are outcomes that all of you are talking about. These are ones that you've witnessed as a result of professionals going through the Power AAC modules. Since that question came in, I thought it would be worth pulling that out right now. Can you guys address that?
So this is Tammy. I do Power AAC every year in a cohort fashion. And yes, this is actual outcomes I see every year that staff are going through, and staff are showing me from where they start to where they finish at the end of the modules that I actually witness with them, that they show me in some of these actual pictures. So yes, these are outcomes that I'm seeing that they're accomplishing through this process.
And I agree as well. This is Erin. That from the teams that have gone through and used the Power AAC modules, again, I have witnessed the change in the adult outcomes.
And one of the things that happened with one of the teams that I worked with, they started to do some of these things, and then other teams in the building were imitating or following their lead. So one team was definitely going through Power AAC, and then some of the practices bled over into other teams.
Which is awesome.
All right, if you saw me on camera right now, you'd see me with a big smile and a very small happy dance. So I love hearing all those. All right, let's continue on. You know, we've already been touching on adult outcomes. I'm going to show just a very short video because I want you ladies to kind of talk a little bit more, not only about modeling, but maybe some other outcomes you see them happening, but maybe address a little bit of some of the journey that some of these folks have had about modeling. So I'm going to show you this video. It's very short. It's only seconds, and it doesn't really have much sound. So let's take a look quickly. All right, so ladies, do you want to talk at all about some of the modeling you're seeing going on, the journey that people have had on learning how to do modeling?
Sure, this is Erin, and that is actually a very short video snippet from a day when the school team went bowling. And so I think what I'm really thrilled about was the fact that they actually have represented on that table so many different types of communication. So they have a masked board, and the teacher thought the one student needed to have some definition between the icons, so came up with the idea of adding on the wiki sticks to give some definition. And so you saw a student using that, I think, that board to model, and the para ed was modeling. And then you see some Go Talks that have a core vocabulary on there, and then you see a lanyard, which the lanyard that has core vocabulary that they can use to communicate when they were bowling. And you see the teacher modeling with that on the lane while the student was getting the ball. So I think I love that it was not just modeling in the classroom, they took it outside into the community. And the para eds had a journey because they were used to a different kind of system within the classroom. And so for them to get to be comfortable and understand their importance and how their behavior of modeling was going to then hopefully change the student behavior was huge. And here, just the fact that that student actually touched the board was really huge, because initially the student didn't want anything to do with it. And that really was because of the classroom adults modeling over and over again. And so here you saw it, not even in the classroom, out in the community using the system. It was pretty awesome. I don't know if I answered that question. I started rambling.
It's great. So, we've talked about modeling, and we see great results across the board when adults are modeling. But modeling is also being in many Power AAC classrooms, paired with providing systematic, explicit core vocabulary. So can you talk, ladies, a little bit about how you see the teams providing that systematic instruction?
Sure, this is Tammy. This is actually one of my teams where they're providing very systematic instruction. So they've created one of the activities in one of the modules is Word of the Week, and they've taken a specific word of the week. In this case, it's more. And here's one of our teachers who's actually showing off on one of the core boards about how they're masking and being very explicit and just being very implicit of how they're going to show off, how they're going to present that word, the different activities they're doing, and very systematic of what they're doing throughout that week so that they can really focus on presenting that word and helping the students learn throughout that process and helping them focus on it within whatever system and process that they're learning.
And this is Nora. One of the things that the team that I worked with extensively, I saw when they were planning their lessons, they would identify vocabulary that they were targeting based on the theme of that lesson. So if it was vehicles, it would be about the theme around vehicles. But once they went through the Power Aac modules, what they started to do was target their vocabulary based on the core vocabulary lists. And then they became, again, very, very purposeful in how they were going to instruct that vocabulary word in multiple times during the day. And I think it helped them target what they were going to be doing, and it helped the students develop more functional communication skills.
Oh, excellent. I think you're all leading up to the very last outcome that you've already addressed, is that where they might have been before a little bit more specific, working on a certain word at a certain time, that we're now seeing core words being used across a range of school and a range of community activities. Do you want to make any other final comments about either these pictures here or any other thoughts on that subject, ladies?
I think this just represents how you're in your classroom setting and you're thinking about what words you need there, but you also have to think about how you can use those same vocabulary words at home, at the grocery store, at talking to a grandparent maybe via FaceTime or whatever, and then in leisure activities. And so the teams were very mindful and planful when they were thinking about their vocabulary words that they were going to systematically target, and think about how they can use them across different environments. And this just shows the classroom versus, again, that bowling alley setting, that it's not just happenstance, they're mindful about it and planned for it.
All right, you already made a comment about how some teams in a school or groups were seeing other people in their school doing some things. So can you just even speak a little bit about how people are sharing with each other and how you are seeing them maybe being more active in the AAC process?
Sure, it's Tammy. Our teams have been very purposeful in how they want to share. They're using, whatever sharing process within their districts, but they're also being aware of how to share with families, how to share with teams that are working outside. So they're being purposeful in how they're able to share with others, so that it's not about just me creating. It's about how we can support everyone else, and they're not all creating the wheel themselves. They want to make sure that everyone is working together, and we're not all just doing it themselves. So they've made sure that they've been able to share lots of different resources in different ways. A lot of times they're creating videos so that people can see what's working in one way and what's not working, so that we understand how to support our students. A lot of times they're creating resources and sharing them with families, so that we all can be working together. A lot of times we've worked in our sessions to talk about different ways we share ways in our sessions in a team page process in Google that's allowed us to share in a larger platform. But we also talk about what works with many people, and what is the great technology that's going to help with across those district processes. So finding that right technology is the most important process, and to go from there.
This is Nora. I think in terms of the teachers being more involved in the process, I think they have a better understanding of AAC and communication. And I think they're also looking at not just trying to have kids answer questions about what the weather is or what the day of the week is. I think their depth of knowledge is there, so that they're, again, like we said multiple times before, that they're looking for multiple opportunities to either provide communication opportunities for the students, or to simply model throughout the course of the day. I don't think they're as scared, and probably scared is not the right word, intimidated is probably the word, in terms of AAC.
All right, great. So we've so far covered the first of our 5 topics, the adult outcomes. Before we go on and talk about specific student and family outcomes, or how to use the modules, what's in the modules, and the future of Power AAC, are there any questions or comments we want to address right now? Susan, is there anything you're seeing, or?
There is a question that came in, I think falls under this category of adult behavior. It is, the question is, when an adult, when you're modeling using the icons, are you touching those icons, the classroom boards, I believe, or using the child's AAC device, or a combination? That was a specific modeling question that came in.
It's Tammy, and I think I kind of got pointed to. So we're doing our teams are doing a combination of both. They're using a large core board, they're using a small core board, and they're using the student's device. It depends what they have available to model. Sometimes they only have the student's device, and that's the only thing that's there. If they have another core board, that's wonderful, so that they can share and have the student be independent. But sometimes we need a student to have more support. Sometimes it's wonderful if we have a second device, but we don't always have that available. We have many times where we will have a totally different board, so that we can show there are many differences in the world, and that not everyone has the same board. So we go with the flow, and we show that there's lots of differences, but we always want to make sure that we're modeling as much as we can. My teams get to know me as the person who says model, model, model. And if I don't say model, model, model enough, it hasn't been said enough.
So you need a shirt that's
I actually have a shirt that says model, model, model. I was kind and didn't wear it today.
And Gail, this is the perfect opportunity for you to name yourself what you told us before we started.
Yes, I'm wearing a hat that says America's Top Modeler. I'm the Tyra Banks of AAC. All right. Thanks, ladies. Let's shift our gears now and start thinking about what are some of those, as adults have changed. What are we now seeing as changes in our students? And how has some of the Power Aac modules shifted some of your parent training focus? So let's start thinking just about the frequency in the availability results in increased use of AAC systems. You've said your teachers are modeling, they're making systems available, they're engineering their classrooms, they're taking it in the community. So what are we seeing changing with our kids, with our students?
This is Nora. Honestly, I think the biggest thing is that students have access to these systems and are starting to use them. And depending on the student, they might be using them for more functions of communication or more frequently throughout the day. But we have students who are actively seeking these systems out, whether it's a low-tech core board, a high-tech app on an AAC device, or something somewhere in between. They're actively seeking these things out.
Agree. And I just, if you notice in the picture, the student is wearing the lanyard in this picture, where before it was the teacher. So the student actually, this student actually did go on to get a dedicated device, but at this point they were in trial processes and just trying to see what was going to work. And I love the fact he had that on, and he would use that those icons to communicate what he wanted to do with the ball or whatever. That was obviously at the bowling alley. So I think, you know, just the shift from the adult maybe always doing that to now you see the student wearing it was pretty fun.
Yeah, and we always talk about having availability of that communication there for the student. So it's always there so that they can communicate, no matter if it's a low tech, it's a mid tech, or it's a high tech, whatever is there. And even if they use a high tech device, always having something of lower tech available so that they can always be communicating in every environment possible. We always want to give them those opportunities to seek out that communication process.
Excellent.
And so I'm just going to chime in. Sometimes, you know, if you have a student that's ambulatory and you're going to the mall or to the store or somewhere, and, you know, they have to hold maybe a heavier device, sometimes it ends up the adult might be the one holding it, and therefore you're losing kind of that quick spontaneous communication. So it's okay, and I think sometimes we have to be okay and understand it's okay to have low tech and high tech and use them both. And sometimes I'm going to the store, I might need to take something more simple because it's just going to be more effective in that situation. I think we have to give ourselves permission to think that's okay.
Yeah. All right, how about talking a little bit about what you're seeing in the words kids are communicating? How are you seeing increased use of core in relationship to fringe words?
It's Tammy. We definitely have seen more core being used so that students are really able to communicate more effectively rather than that labeling of those fringe words, because you're able to express yourself more with core. You're able to communicate more effectively when you have access to that core language of putting more words together than when you're able to look at that fringe and you really are just being able to label and pull out words of what you're looking at compared to making conversation and communicating with others with core words.
Yeah, I think because teachers are thinking core first rather than fringe first, students are using core more regularly.
And I would totally agree.
All right, and how has that translated into some of the classroom participation things? I'm wondering about changes you're noticing and how core words are now part of things like visual schedules or scripts. Maybe you're seeing more materials being authored using core to address curriculum. How are you seeing classroom participation changing?
I think, like we've said earlier, there's just more of core and more of core throughout the classroom. And then I think a lot of what we see then is students, sometimes their behavior is not as big of a problem because they have a way to communicate and they have a way to communicate something meaningfully. And so because teachers are not focusing on managing behavior, they're able to do more of the instruction and then set up more opportunities for communication.
And I see just maybe it's during their circle time or their reading of a story. And just kind of like Nora said earlier, they're thinking more about the core vocabulary words that they will use to talk about the book, to talk about the story, to talk about the picture, and really targeting those, and then still having the fringe words there because we still want to teach a lot of the other vocabulary. I mean, these kids are still learning those words, but it's not the focus. And so I think that's a bigger change. So maybe instead, if maybe they were putting together a page for a book, initially it would have been all the nouns, maybe the very hungry caterpillar. It would have been, the strawberry and I'm blanking on it all, whatever, all the words that were in the story. Yeah. But now it is more, he's go in or eat, and so they're talking about that. Still having those other pictures available, but that's not the focus. So I think that's a big shift.
All right. And as we think about other outcomes with our core group of people we want to change, how about families? Any stories of family involvement and the use of the AAC system at home?
I think the most significant thing that the team reported back to me was that when they've chosen a core word of the week, they are then able to send the information home to the parents and give them very specific activities about how to implement that core word of the week at home. And parents are then able to understand and use that more readily at home.
And in our case, we've seen some families who are just so excited to support their students because they're able to communicate more. They're able to see the progress their students are making to be able to communicate to them, but also to communicate to others. So when they're meeting with extended family and they're able to go up to them and say hi in some fashion that they've never been able to in the past, either on a core board or on a device. Instead, in the past, they've just stood there. They're now
I didn't catch that.
They're now able to communicate to that person. It really gets all of those family members very excited. So that communication is just making families very excited to have progress with communication all around.
Excellent. All right, we've got about 7 minutes. At this point, though, I don't want to rush by if there is a question or comment that we need to address before we touch on our last 3 topics, which will be short.
I think we can move ahead for now, Gail.
Okay, so let's shift to some logistics. And would you ladies provide some information about how you've actually used the modules as part of your overall training plans?
So it's Tammy. I do a year-long series. It works out to be about 10 months, and we encompass all 12 of the modules, and we do that training schedule on a monthly basis, and we do a process of they view the video, they respond to some questions, then we meet online, we clarify any questions from the modules, as well as we answer any questions that have come up, and then we wrap up that module through a homework assignment, and then we repeat that through each of the modules. And we do that throughout, we refer to it as a cohort, and we do that throughout about 10 months throughout the entire school year. That's our training process, Power AAC. And
next year in IU 11 area, we're going to be using these Power AAC modules as the base with 1 or 2 on-site training days where we all come together, and then some either virtual or on-site visits by myself. So we'll be using these next year to roll it out with, kind of reminds me what people like, the virtual, their own online learning, but then also some face-to-face. Because I know when we went through those modules, people did prefer in my area to do it as a team and get together rather than just all individuals. So we're mixing it all together.
I'm doing a combination of a couple of those things. I'm doing an AAC Summer Institute in August in Delaware County, and then hoping to use that as a jumping off point to do some sort of PLC kinds of work throughout the rest of the school year.
All right, fabulous. Any questions and comments about how these team members have implemented the modules? So I think then, let's think a little bit about the content of the modules. You know, the Power Aac modules contain a lot of information, but they actually don't cover every possible thing that might need to be covered in a professional development training. There are also lots of other questions and topics which weren't covered in the Power Aac modules. So on that note, could you ladies tell us a little bit about what other things related to AAC that for which people needed additional training information?
I think what in Delaware County, what I see the most requests about are things like device specific information. You know, what are the latest and greatest AAC apps or dedicated devices, and people are also really in need of some support with writing goals and specially designed instructions with regard to AAC, and then understanding how to fund a device. They're the three big things that come up that are outside of the theory and implementation of the modules for AAC.
And I'm going to add to that and just say, really looking at using AAC in literacy when you're teaching kids to read and to write, and what that looks like and how that works.
And to follow up on that, all of that, but also we talk a lot about the set process and to make sure that we're using the right AT for that particular student and how to go about that process.
Excellent, thanks. So I don't know if there was any questions or comments about that. Otherwise, in our couple minutes we have left, let's just touch on the idea of moving forward with the Power AAC modules. You know, they are a great resource, and we really want more people to know about them. Can you speak about your future plans in the use of the Power AAC modules? There's a couple questions on here about getting the word out, using it with non-English speaking people. Anything you want to address here?
Particularly the last one about non-English speaking, there is a great feature in Office 365 that you're able to, because the PowerPoint is available on Patton's website, you're able to translate the text on the PowerPoint into another language, but you're also able to do a closed captioning into other languages. So if that's something you're interested in, I'd encourage you to look into those features in Office 365.
This is Susan. I'm going to chime in here about, because we're need to be wrapping up in a couple of important things. One is that while we are here talking about these, planful group use of the Power AAC modules, we have encountered many people who use them individually, and that's independently. That is part of the beauty of having all of the materials, like all of the materials there online. People don't have to like email and say, oh, could you send me this? Everything is there. It's for people who might want to, including families who may want to learn more. And that if you're thinking of diving into these and exploring these yourself as an individual, you may get into it and you're going to wind up talking to somebody and you'll wind up in a buddy system about it. It may not be an organized professional development thing, but that's a really great way to utilize them. And I'm going to add one last thing, is that the picture in the last slide, which is really easy to bypass, is that this past year at our PDE conference, we had several teams who presented a poster session on what they were doing in their districts. This particular one is a team that Tammy was working with, who went on and without Tammy, submitted their poster session, which was accepted, and it was really a popular session on the poster floor at the PDE conference. So that sharing beyond the original PD seems to be a developing pattern.
Great, thanks for commenting and saying that, Susan. So we're really hoping that after attending this session, you'll make a plan to use those Power Aac modules. Go to that website and download the conference resources we've posted and join us in spreading the word about Power AAC modules. And so I just say on behalf of the team here, thank you. For any more information, please contact Susan Gill or Tammy Cook. You see their information here on their slides. That if you have the handout that was originally sent with this, it might not contain this contact information, so jot that down. And if there's any last question, my clock is showing that it's 11:15. And I know you may have another session or lunch to go get. I don't know.
Right. We're lined right up with another session. Thank you so much, Gail and Erin and Tammy and Nora. It's wonderful to hear about all the good work going on in Pennsylvania using these resources that are available to everyone. So thank you all. Before I provide you with the code, again, for those who weren't with us in our initial AAC talk session, go to the website. The link is there in the chat for you to learn more about what you need to do for continuing education. I am going to give you the code, and I am going to also put it in the chat box for those who may look away and miss it. The code for this session is 9038. 9038. And a final reminder that those surveys where you'll be putting these codes in, if you're looking to continue in ed credit, are available just until Friday at 4 o'clock. Thank you so much, all of you, and particularly thank you, Gail. All right, we'll be wrapping things up.
Bye. Thank you all.